Thanks very much. That was an absolutely fantastic presentation from Brian. It's a very complex picture of what's happening on the northern border. My talk will focus a little bit more on southern border, U.S.-Mexico border issues, but I'll try to keep it all in context. Again, my name is Erik. I'm at the North American Center at Arizona State University. We're a policy shop, a public policy center. We don't do this for academic credit, as they say. We focus on what you, the policymakers, need. And I can talk a little bit more about those projects that we work on with CSG a little bit later. If you take nothing, kind of to repeat what Brian said, if you take nothing else away from this conference, you should know that these are absolutely critical relationships that the United States has with Canada and Mexico. This is a different kind of trade. We'll not use that word again, as Brian suggested. We'll talk about joint production. This is a third of all U.S. Commercial interaction with the rest of the world. This is really unbelievable, the quantity of commercial interaction that takes place across our borders. Needless to say, though, or I think it's interesting to note that this is like secret knowledge. The ecosystem of public policy centers in North America is a fragile ecosystem. It's like Brian up in Canada, Paul out on in the northwestern United States, NACS in Arizona. There's not a lot of people that look at this stuff day in and day out, and the general public, our legislators are also kind of hidden or kept in the dark about a lot of this information, which is great stuff. So a lot of this, the fact that Canada is our number one trading partner or number one joint production partner, Mexico is our number 3 joint production partner, is what we call hidden in plain sight. We are largely unaware of this in the United States. Why is that? I think it's because trade or joint production is very messy politically, extremely messy, very abstract and extremely detailed at the same time. Panama, South Korea, and Colombia were pulling their hair out there for years until those trade agreements were passed last week in Congress. The North American Free Trade Agreement that was implemented in 1994 was actually the process of several years of negotiation between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The 1988 federal elections in Canada witnessed a bitter battle over trade over the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement. The 1994 the passage of NAFTA in Mexico was equally as contentious. The Zapatista rebellion was partly in Chiapas, was partly about NAFTA. So this is very contentious stuff. Although the benefits are broad, the pain is felt by a concentrated few. It's also very, very detailed stuff. A friend of mine that used to work for the U.S. Department of Commerce in Tel Aviv and in Washington said, "Listen, Erik, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I don't consider myself an expert. There's a lot of detail on these trade details." And one of the phrases that came up in a talk, I think yesterday or perhaps the day before, was about the economic statecraft. I love that phrase. It's a fantastic phrase. And I want to talk a little bit about the economic statecraft of Canada and Mexico. It's all about jobs, as Representative Jones from Arizona and many previous speakers mentioned. It's all about jobs at this point. Canada is generally quite good with their joint production or their trade ground game in the United States. They have very, very good materials. The consulates do a really good job on getting out in the communities and talking about the value of the U.S.-Canada relationship and as it relates to those particular states they're in and those particular communities. The trade maps are actually on display here in the expo area. Mexico is curiously just getting into this kind of public diplomacy on trade, or this economic statecraft. Mexico now has a trade map of the United States. I have a copy. Hardly anybody has a copy of this. It's again the secret knowledge that we seem to possess. The numbers are unbelievable. Arizona does $9 or $10 billion a year of two-way trade with Mexico. Texas does the most with about $140 billion a year. But it is the states in the Middle West that are really impressive. The numbers there are quite impressive. They're up in the hundreds of millions, low billions. Nebraska, for example, sends, I believe it was Nebraska, sends over 95% of its soybeans to Mexico. So, again, these are relationships that are absolutely critical for our state and local economies. We're at an interesting point in history with U.S.-Mexico trade. As many of you are aware, Mexican trucks were prohibited from passing into the United States past the 25-mile zone near the border. The first truck, the United States and Mexico have since come to an agreement that would allow Mexican trucks to travel further into the United States on a limited basis. The first truck rolled out of Tijuana yesterday. It remains to be seen how this is going to play out. The tension around this issue is quite impressive. Mexico, the government of Mexico, I think, had a fairly effective ground game with the U.S. Congress and was able to take this map around to individual members of Congress and say, hey, look how much two-way trade your state does with Mexico. And I think it really, a lot of this happened behind the scenes, but I think this really impressed key members of Congress, and we've been able to get to this point where we can actually have Mexican trucks passing into the United States as we originally intended with NAFTA. Curiously enough, during this entire conference, which was just absolutely excellent, by the way, excellent job by CSG, I'd never heard the phrase National Exports Initiative. This is an Obama administration initiative to double our exports over the next 5 years. It's very ambitious. It is not widely known. This is a U.S. Department of Commerce initiative. I would say it's unfortunate that we haven't taken that up as a major objective, that objective is not more widely shared. I think it's because the U.S. Department of Commerce is, in terms of our borders, how our borders are managed, a fairly weak agency with respect to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which is historic reorganization of the U.S. federal government, 22 agencies folded into one super agency. It's really quite amazing. So I think we want to keep that frame of doubling our exports over the next 5 years. I think that's an excellent goal for the United States at this time, and I just wanted to bring that up. Maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A. So I also want to be as practical as possible. What can you do? I've been thinking about this during the conference. What can you do as legislators, as members of CSG? It would be good for you to know that I didn't really mention the security situation in Mexico, which affects the joint production relationship between the United States and Mexico. CSG is already working on this issue. It supports the U.S.-Mexico State Alliance Partnership, which is managed by our colleagues at CSG West in Sacramento. The Conference of Western Attorneys General do trainings of Mexican law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, police, and forensic experts, and that is really, really important work that will help Mexico in its rule of law issues and probably help our collective economic security and security more broadly. So CSG is already working to make this trade safe and to protect the trade corridors of North America. I would also say that it's very important for members of CSG to get to know your consuls, your Canadian and Mexican consuls. They are there to work with you. They're usually very experienced people. They've been around the world. The Canadian consuls are more focused on trade issues, on economic development than the Mexican consuls are right now. The Mexican consuls are generally focused on what we call consular affairs, passports, birth certificates, that kind of thing. They're attending to the Mexican community in the United States. But as Mexican migration to the U.S. tails off over time, as it is doing now, it is our hope as a center that they will be more focused on trade issues. I would also suggest that you go on as many junkets to Canada and Mexico as you can. We are pro-junket at our center. Definitely travel to Canada. Definitely travel to Mexico. I'm going to Chihuahua City next week with Paul Sommerhausen of CSGovts to talk to the state Congress there. I have some recommendations for you about where to go if you'd like. Definitely fly out to Phoenix if you'd like. Call us up. We will take you down to tour the U.S.-Mexico border there in Nogales or the Yuma area. We'd be glad to do that. So definitely get out and travel as much as you possibly can. And I think with that, I'll leave it, and we can pass on to Paul.